Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the mud and smoke of a medieval village, where you wake up not in a cozy bed with memory foam, but on a straw mattress that's itching with more wildlife than a petting zoo. You're not a knight in shining armor or a princess in a tower. No, you're a serf. That means your life is legally tied to the land. And no, you probably won't survive this. But don't worry, I'll walk you through it gently, like a sleepy guide with one lantern and way too many sarcastic remarks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir before dawn, because that's when life for a serf begins. The first sound isn't an alarm clock, it's the rooster, your neighbor's baby crying, or maybe just the cough of someone who spent all night breathing smoke from the hearth. The cottage you share with your family is a single smoky room, the air heavy with yesterday's stew and damp straw. You rub your eyes, pull a rough wool tunic over your head, and step outside into the morning chill. The world outside is hushed but busy in its own way. The manor's fields stretch out, mist rising from the ground, and smoke curls lazily from other cottages. You smell dung, because of course, you're probably walking through it. The animals need tending before the sun is properly up. That means chickens are chased out, pigs fed scraps, and cows milked with hands still half asleep. Fact check for your sleepy brain. Medieval serfs really did rise with the sun, because time wasn't tracked with clocks in every home. Instead, the rhythm of work followed daylight and the seasons. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasants slept in two shifts, a first sleep and a second sleep broken by midnight prayers, or if that was just a rare monastic pattern. But whether you napped in chunks or snored through, your day started early. You trudge barefoot across damp grass, and the mud squishes between your toes. Think of it as a free spa treatment, except it smells more like fertilizer. The village is already stirring, one neighbor sharpening a tool, another coaxing a reluctant ox to move. It's not glamorous, but there's comfort in the predictability. You know everyone, and everyone knows you. Privacy? Forget it. Your business is as public as the open field. One quirky tidbit: some medieval villages rang bells not just for church, but also to announce the start of work in the fields. Imagine that a communal snooze button, except if you ignored it, you'd be fined at the manor court later. By now, your stomach growls. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is coarse bread baked yesterday, dipped in weak ale. Yes, ale, because the water isn't always safe. And besides, beer is basically liquid bread. Don't picture craft brews with fancy hops, though. This is closer to murky oatmeal that makes you burp. The chores don't end with animals and food. There's firewood to collect, a hearth to sweep, tools to mend. And no, you can't just call in sick. Unless you're dying, you're expected to show up in the fields, or the steward will notice. Being lazy isn't just frowned upon, it's legally and economically dangerous. As the sky brightens, you can hear the distant sound of the Lord's bell summoning workers. You pick up your tools, heavy, wooden, and worn, and join the slow procession of neighbors heading toward the manor fields. Some joke, some yawn, some already look like they'd sell their soul for a nap. Walking there, you feel the rhythm of daily life pressing in. Every step is part of a cycle that has repeated for generations. The mud underfoot, the cries of animals, the muttered prayers of tired neighbors, all of it ties you to this land, to this manor, to this existence. And here's the kicker: you're not free to just walk away. The law says you belong to the land. The fields stretch out before you, wide and wet with dew. And as you trudge toward your assigned patch, you realize that a serf's life is ruled by the seasons more than any clock. Spring is all about turning the heavy, stubborn soil, planting seed after seed, and praying that the weather behaves. Summer brings relentless weeding, watering, and the occasional blessing of sun that isn't scorching. Autumn is a frantic blur of harvest sickles flashing, baskets brimming, dust in your eyes. And winter? Well, that's when you trudge through mud and frozen ground, repairing fences, caring for animals, or just staring wistfully at the horizon while wishing you had a fireplace bigger than a shoebox. Historians still argue whether some regions experience slightly more leisure in winter, or if that is just romanticized imagination. You notice how each season comes with its own soundtrack. Birds in spring, buzzing flies in summer, the harsh scrape of tools in autumn, and the hollow crunch of frost underfoot in winter. Your body remembers the cycles intimately. Every ache in your shoulders and back corresponds to a particular crop and stage of labor. You start to feel the year in your bones, not in calendars. A quirky tidbit? Some villages held rough music festivals after harvest, where the entire community made cacophonous noise to scare away bad spirits or just entertain themselves. You get the feeling that a medieval party involved more shouting and less confetti. Working in the fields is not just about physical effort. It's a constant negotiation with the unpredictable. Rain can wash away seeds, frost can ruin tender shoots, and locusts or even deer can devastate crops. You might spend a week planting, only to watch the wind and soil betray your work. And yet, there's satisfaction too. When the first shoots break the earth, it's as if you've coaxed life from the soil itself. Your tools are simple, but require skill. A plow pulled by oxen demands coordination and brute strength. You guide the animals with a mix of voice, whip, and instinct, feeling the vibration through your arms as wood scrapes stone and soil. You wonder if your hands will ever be soft again. Historians still debate whether some serfs had more autonomy over their plots, or if every inch of labor was strictly dictated by the lord as steward. When you pause for a drink from a small, hand-carved bucket, you notice the variety in the fields. Grains, vegetables, legumes, and sometimes the indulgent luxury of herbs grown for flavor or medicine. You marvel at this patchwork. These modest yields will feed not just your family, but also contribute to taxes, rents, and tithes. It's all interconnected in a delicate balance, one mistake away from hunger or punishment. By late afternoon, the sun hangs low, and your feet are coated with layers of mud and straw. Sweat mingles with grime, and your tunic sticks uncomfortably to your back. Yet there's camaraderie here. Fellow serfs offer small jokes, share stories, or trade small favors. Even in a life dictated by toil, human bonds form in the space between furrows. Sometimes you glimpse the manor house on the hill, its stone walls stark against the sky, a reminder of the hierarchy that defines your existence. The Lord is mostly absent from the fields, yet his shadow hangs over every plow stroke, every seed sown. The crops are as much a measure of your labor as they are a symbol of his power. By sunset, the field glows gold, and for a fleeting moment, it almost looks beautiful. You feel pride mixed with exhaustion, a sense of purpose bound by necessity. You trudge back to the village, hands blistered, back aching, heart full of small victories and minor defeats. And then comes the evening chill, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke from other cottages. You realize that this cycle will repeat tomorrow, and the next, all marked by the merciless rhythm of seasons, sun, and survival. By now, your body has memorized the feel of tools as if they were extensions of your own limbs. The plow is heavy and awkward, the wooden handle worn smooth by years of hands like yours. Sickles gleam faintly in the sun, curved and sharp, slicing through grain with a rhythm that is almost hypnotic if you can ignore the ache in your shoulders. Rakes, hoes, spades, each one demands a unique posture, a unique blend of patience and brute strength. Historians still argue whether serfs were more skilled than we give them credit for, or if the constant labor was largely brute force with minimal technique. You feel like your forearms have been cast from the field itself. The day begins with plowing. Oxen strain against yokes, groaning, and you press your weight into the wooden beam, feeling every bump of uneven earth. Occasionally, the plow snags a root or stone, jolting you forward with a painful reminder that the soil is alive and often resentful. If you drop the harness or fumble, there's no safety net. You scramble to reset it, hoping your fellow workers don't laugh, or worse, that the steward doesn't notice. By mid-morning, your tunic clings to your back with sweat, your hands are raw, and yet you continue. A serf's life is less about choice and more about endurance. The sickle comes next, cutting wheat or barley in arcs that make your back scream in protest. Imagine trying to slice through golden stalks while bending over, twisting, and dodging the occasional vengeful thorn bush. Your muscles scream at you, but that's just another morning in the medieval version of boot camp. A fringe tidbit: some chroniclers reported that certain serfs decorated their sickles with simple carvings or charms, possibly to bring luck or amuse themselves during monotonous labor. You can almost picture it: a tiny heart etched into metal as a small rebellion against the grind. By the afternoon, you move to lighter tasks, maybe gathering fallen grain, repairing fences, or stacking hay. Still, light is relative. Each activity stretches your body in unfamiliar ways, muscles protesting in places you didn't even know existed. You adjust your posture, remembering what your father said about keeping a straight back, though whether that advice prevented chronic pain is up for debate. Historians still debate how much serfs suffered long-term injuries versus how much modern imagination exaggerates their misery. Then there's the constant need to maintain your tools. A dull blade or a broken plow can spell disaster for your day's labor. Or worse, draw the Lord's ire. You sharpen, hammer, and oil metal, occasionally complaining aloud, occasionally muttering a curse at the weather, the oxen, or the entire social system. These tasks are part maintenance, part meditation, though more painful than spiritual. One moment you pause, noticing a bird alighting on a fence post, and you realize that despite exhaustion, there's a rhythm, almost a poetry, in all this toil. Your hands are caked with mud, your palms raw, your back aching, yet each motion flows into the next. The land is demanding, relentless, but it also teaches timing, patience, and endurance in a way nothing else could. Evening approaches, and you carry tools back to the small shed behind your cottage. You clean them meticulously, because a dull edge tomorrow can mean more labor today. There is a strange intimacy in this act. A serf as tool is an extension of self, much like a modern person's phone or laptop, though with infinitely more physical consequence if neglected. As the sun dips below the horizon, your body is heavy, stiff, and sore, but there's a quiet satisfaction. You survived another day of brutal, precise, and relentless work. You know you'll rise again before dawn. Repeat every motion, and the tools will be waiting for you, silent yet exacting, demanding respect and attention. The evening air is cooler, the smell of mud and smoke mingling. You lean against the fence, watching neighbors return, some joking, others silent, all exhausted. And you realize that the very act of wielding these tools, of guiding plows, cutting grain, repairing fences, is what defines your existence. Work is your identity, and in that identity, even in suffering, there is a strange, stubborn pride. After wielding tools from dawn to dusk, you finally pause to think about why you're doing all of this. Not just for your family, not just for survival, but for the manor, the Lord, and a system older than your great-grandfather's stories. Rent, dues, and labor obligations dominate your existence in ways that feel invisible until you try to escape them. The Lord doesn't simply ask for a portion of your crops. He demands time, attention, and loyalty. You spend a set number of days plowing his fields, cutting his timber, or tending his animals, often in addition to cultivating your own small plot. Historians still argue whether these obligations varied widely from manor to manor or were surprisingly standardized across regions. Each morning, you trudge past the manor house with your basket of goods or your hands caked in mud, aware that some overseer might inspect your labor. Fail to meet expectations, and fines or extra work await. Payment can be in crops, eggs, cheese, or a fraction of your labor, sometimes so complex it feels like an elaborate game of math you never agreed to play. If you're lucky, you might owe only 1 day a week in service. Unlucky, and it could be more than half your time. Either way, the manor's web of obligations is inescapable. One quirky tidbit: some manors recorded labor obligations on wooden tally sticks or knotted cords, giving the entire system a tactile, almost playful element. Imagine logging your debts by carving notches in sticks, then handing them over like a primitive to-do list. In a way, it's charming if you ignore the fact that a missed notch could get you whipped. You notice the subtle hierarchy among serfs. Some have been granted small freedoms, like keeping a particular plot of woodland or selling a portion of surplus crops at local fairs. Others are bound more tightly, expected to provide labor almost around the clock. You recognize the difference because your neighbor carries an extra basket for dues while grumbling, and you carry only slightly less, resenting the unfairness, but knowing there's little recourse. Taxes and dues are not purely financial, they're deeply social. Failure to provide means loss of reputation, gossip, or even public shame at the manorial court. You trade favors, lend tools, or help neighbors during peak seasons to build goodwill, hoping these small acts buffer you from the Lord's oversight. And yet, no amount of cleverness completely frees you. The rhythm of dues shapes your entire week. Monday might be the Lord's field, Tuesday for your family, Wednesday for road repair, Thursday for harvesting communal grain, and Friday for personal projects, if you have time and energy. Saturdays often bring extra chores, like fixing fences or helping in the bakehouse. Sundays are technically a break, but tithes and church obligations often spill into the day, reminding you that service is continuous. Historians still debate whether some communities treated these rules more leniently or whether they were strictly enforced, with local variation hiding in the gaps of surviving records. By late afternoon, you pause, basket in hand, surveying your work. You understand that every grain, every log, every painstakingly dug furrow ultimately supports a complex hierarchy. The Lord benefits from your labor, the steward enforces the rules, and your family subsists on the leftovers. Still, even in this exhausting, unequal system, there is a kind of rhythm. You learn to anticipate the Lord's demands, to plan your own work around them, and even to carve moments of small autonomy from your obligations. The air carries the smell of fresh-cut grain, mingling with mud and dung a bouquet that will stay with you until sleep drags you into your straw mattress. You remember that each day of work is not just about survival, but about maintaining your place in a system older than your grandparents. Grandparents? A system that ties together land, lord, and serf in a delicate, sometimes oppressive dance. And yet, somehow, you keep moving, keep planting, keep harvesting, because that is what it means to be bound to the land you call home, even when it tests every ounce of your strength and patience. The lord of the manor looms like a distant mountain on the horizon of your daily life. You rarely meet him directly. Most of your interactions are filtered through stewards, bailiffs, or the occasional manor clerk, but his presence is everywhere, in the rules you follow, the taxes you pay, and the work you perform. The Lord provides protection, or at least claims to, from bandits, rival lords, or marauding armies. In return, you offer labor, crops, and obedience. Historians still argue whether this exchange genuinely benefited peasants or simply reinforced a rigid hierarchy that left them perpetually vulnerable. Walking past the manor house, you can't help but notice its stone walls, polished windows, and the flicker of servants moving within. Your cottages are humble, made of wattle and daub with thatched roofs, and every bump or draft reminds you how starkly divided your world is. The contrast isn't just economic, it's psychological. Your lord lives in comfort, sheltered from the wind, rain, and mud that define your existence. Yet the system works because each role is mutually dependent. The lord needs labor to feed his household and manage his lands. And you need the land itself, for even serfs cannot survive without access to soil to grow food. One quirky tidbit: some lords would host mock knights tournaments for fun, inviting peasants to watch in awe while sipping their ale, or, if you were exceptionally unlucky, being roped into serving as human props or fetching stray horses. You grin at the thought. Centuries later, people still argue whether these events were mostly harmless entertainment or thinly veiled displays of class power. Your interaction with the lord's household is usually indirect. The steward acts as the interface, assigning labor, collecting rents, and arbitrating disputes. You may bow, curtsy, or otherwise signal respect when you pass the manor, but real intimacy with the lord is rare. Even so, the lord's tastes shape your life. Crops grown, taxes exacted, tools required, and sometimes even local customs and punishments. The social contract is not optional. It's woven into every field, fence, and cobbled path. Beyond work and taxes, the lord also embodies a form of protection. Bandits, rival knights, and marauding armies may threaten villages, and the lord claims responsibility for safety. In practice, protection can be inconsistent, but the promise itself is a cornerstone of your reality. You recognize that your labor is essentially the cost of security, and while you might grumble, it's a bargain you cannot easily reject. Even during routine chores, the lord's influence touches your life. He may dictate crop rotation, approve the construction of cottages, or set the calendar for market fairs. The manor is a tightly woven ecosystem, with every action, even planting a potato, subject to rules that originate from his household. This structure is oppressive, but it's also strangely efficient. The village functions as an organism, and the lord's hand is the guiding force, whether benevolent or capricious. You notice neighbors whispering about the lord's latest decree or minor punishments meted out in the manor court. These stories carry cautionary weight. You learn which behaviors are acceptable, which tools must be sharpened, and when to avoid eye contact. Even small acts of resistance, like hiding a few eggs or slipping extra butter to a neighbor, must be calculated carefully. The lord doesn't need to oversee everything personally. The structure itself enforces obedience. By nightfall, you trudge back toward your cottage, shoulders aching, hands raw, and mind weary. You can't help but glance toward the manor once more, its walls glowing softly in torchlight, a reminder of the rigid, sometimes comforting, always omnipresent hierarchy. Life as a serf is not defined by moments of freedom, but by the steady negotiation between obligation and survival, labor and protection. And though the lord may seem distant, you feel his influence in every blade of grass, every brick in the wall, every breath of your exhausting day. The manorial court is a place you both dread and respect, a center of authority that governs the smallest misstep and the most consequential dispute alike. You trudge across the village square, feeling the weight of your labor and the dust from countless feet before you, knowing that this day, like many others, might bring judgment or reprimand. Cases range from failing to meet labor obligations to petty theft, disputes over grazing rights, or a misunderstanding between neighbors that escalated beyond polite conversation. Historians still argue whether these courts primarily served justice or functioned as tools of social control, though either way, everyone respects their decisions or fears the consequences of defiance. The court convenes in a simple hall near the Lord's Manor, sometimes just a raised platform in the open air, where the steward or the Lord himself presides. Witnesses speak, the accused mumbles their defense, and fines are handed down. These fines are not merely punitive, they reinforce the power hierarchy and the delicate equilibrium of the village. You notice that even minor incidents, like letting pigs wander into a neighbor's field, can result in a day of extra labor, a fine of grain, or public humiliation. A quirky tidbit: in some villages, rough music or community mockery was part of the court process, where offenders were paraded with pots and pans clanging behind them to shame them publicly. Imagine the medieval version of social media roast, except it's happening in front of everyone you know. You can almost hear the laughter echoing as you picture yourself dodging a pan or two. Daily life often brings smaller, informal disputes that never reach the court but simmer in whispered conversations. Arguments over water access, fence boundaries, or who got the best portion of the harvest might erupt into minor skirmishes. Some elders serve as mediators, their wisdom and memory of past rulings lending weight. Historians still debate how effective these informal mechanisms were in maintaining peace versus simply reinforcing local hierarchies and favoritism. The court's role is multifaceted. It serves as the arbiter of rights, the enforcer of dues, and a spectacle that reminds everyone of their place. Even the gossip that travels from one side of the village to another reinforces social norms. You notice that people behave differently in public versus private, subtly negotiating the boundaries of what's acceptable, and constantly aware that misbehavior can escalate into legal consequences. Punishments vary, but they're usually symbolic rather than lethal extra labor, fines, temporary restrictions on grazing or firewood, or public shaming. Sometimes, repeat offenders face harsher consequences, reminding you that compliance is a daily necessity. Yet, strangely, there's an underlying rhythm to it all. People argue, fines are collected, restitution is made, and life continues. The court is as much about maintaining community order as it is about enforcing authority. By the afternoon, you leave the court, shoulders tense from standing, mind alert from listening to testimonies, and heart aware that your next mistake or your neighbor might land you back under the steward's watchful eye. And yet, life continues. You return to the fields, repair fences, or tend to animals, all under the quiet, omnipresent influence of the court's memory. Every action is measured, every word calculated, because social order, like the plowed rows of a field, is painstakingly maintained. Even as you trudge home, you recall the arguments, the laughter, the clanging pans, and the quiet moments of tension in the court. It's not glamorous, but it's the backbone of village life, a reminder that law, labor, and daily survival are intertwined. And tonight, as you finally settle onto your straw mattress, the memory of the court lingers, shaping how you move, speak, and even dream. Step across the threshold of your cottage, and the outside world, the Lord's court, the plowed fields, the gossip of the village falls away. Inside is not comfort in the modern sense, but it is yours, stitched together with timber, wattle, and daub. The walls are smeared with mud and straw, whitewashed if you are lucky, cracked and drafty if you are not. A thatched roof looms overhead, shedding water when it is new, dripping mischievously when it grows old. Chickens sometimes roost in the beams, and mice scuttle along the straw-strewn floor as if they own the place. There are no rooms, not really. Just one space, smoky and dim, with the hearth at its center. The fire is your lifeline and your torment. It cooks your gruel, warms your bones, and drives back the damp. But it fills the cottage with smoke until your eyes sting and your lungs cough. Chimneys are rare. Instead, the smoke escapes slowly through a hole in the roof, or more often, it clings stubbornly to the rafters, blackening them over years. You learn to live half-blind in a haze, accepting that comfort is always seasoned with irritation. Furniture is sparse. A rough table, a bench, maybe a chest for storing the few things worth keeping safe. Beds are straw-stuffed sacks, shared by the whole family, sometimes even with the animals in winter. Warmth is survival, and privacy is a luxury you have never known. Children sleep curled like puppies, parents nearby, the air thick with the scent of wool, sweat, and wood smoke. The flicker of the hearth is the only lamp after sundown, unless you dare waste tallow on a candle. Meals are simple, repetitive, and unglamorous. Pottage, a simmering stew of whatever you can throw in, dominates. Barley, beans, leeks, maybe a shred of salted pork if fortune has smiled. Bread, dark and coarse, is both staple and prize. On days when grain runs short, you stretch it with acorns or ground peas, a desperate trick that leaves bellies heavy but spirits low. Meat is rare. Ale is safer than water. Dairy, when you have a cow or goat, is a blessing. You eat to live, not to delight. Still, hunger sharpens appreciation, and even a crust of bread feels divine when you are starving. Quirky details slip into daily life. Some families hang charms above the hearth, little tokens against evil spirits or bad luck. A horseshoe, perhaps, or sprigs of herbs thought to ward off disease. You might believe or pretend to believe that these hold power. After all, when the world feels so uncontrollable, even superstition brings a measure of calm. Historians still argue whether these charms were religious gestures, practical pest deterrents, or simply traditions passed down because no one did. When the bell tolls on Sunday morning, your weary limbs have no choice but to rise. The week's work plowing, sowing, sweating in the fields pauses, and you step toward something larger than your own survival, the parish church. It looms at the center of village life, not grand like cathedrals, but a squat stone presence, older than memory. Its walls hold not just prayers, but gossip, bargains, confessions, and fears. Inside, light filters dimly through narrow windows. The air smells of damp stone and beeswax, with a faint undertone of incense on feast days. You shuffle into place with your neighbors, each of you more alike than different mud on boots, hands calloused, clothes patched. The priest speaks in Latin, a language you cannot follow, but you catch the rhythm and the gestures, the rising and falling of words that promise salvation if only you stay in line. You kneel, stand, bow, and cross yourself, not because you grasp theology, but because this is what it means to belong. Religion is not just belief, it is routine. You mark time by feast days and fasts, by saints' festivals and holy days of obligation. These break the monotony of toil, offering both relief and extra labor. On feast days, there is dancing, ale, and a rare sense of freedom. But there is also the expectation of charity, of giving what little you have to those poorer still, or to the church's alms box, which somehow always feels heavy with your coin, yet never quite full enough to ease anyone's hunger. The churchyard doubles as a marketplace, a gossip hub, and sometimes a courtroom. Announcements are made here. Disputes are whispered into the priest's ear, hoping for mediation. You trade eggs for salt, news for favors, secrets for silence. When you walk home, you carry not only the memory of chance, but the latest rumor. A neighbor's daughter betrothed, a man fined for shirking duties, a cow found dead under mysterious circumstances. Quirks abound. Holy water is sprinkled not only on people, but sometimes on fields, believed to guard against bad harvests. Pilgrims occasionally wander through, selling trinkets said to contain saintly relics, a feather, a splinter of wood, a scrap of cloth. Whether they are real or frauds, you cannot know. Historians still argue whether such relics brought genuine spiritual comfort or were simply medieval marketing schemes. Either way, villagers bought them, clutched them, and prayed over them. Step outside your cottage on any given morning, and you realize that you are never truly alone. Your life is braided tightly with your neighbors, and the village hums like a hive. Paths cross constantly at the well, the bake oven, the fields, the alehouse. Privacy is a luxury you don't just lack. It's one you can't even imagine. Every misstep, every kindness, every whispered quarrel ripples outward. The bonds you share with neighbors are both lifeline and leash. When your plow breaks, it's a neighbor who lends a hand. When your child is sick, someone brings herbs or whispers a prayer. You lean on one another in times of fire, flood, or famine, because survival in this world is never solitary. Yet the same eyes that watch over you also judge you. If your fence leans too far into a common path, or if your pig strays into someone else's patch of beans, the gossip begins before the matter ever reaches the manor court. Social ties stretch beyond favors into rituals. Weddings are not private affairs, but village festivals, where the union of two people stitches families and sometimes rivalries together. Baptisms bring everyone to the church, sealing a child's life into the community. Even funerals, somber as they are, reinforce the threads of belonging, reminding everyone that the living and the dead alike belong to this soil. You may not own the land, but you are rooted in it with the others. Sometimes, the village feels like one large family. You know the sound of each neighbor's cough, the gait of their footsteps, the timbre of their laughter. Children play in packs, darting between cottages, chasing chickens, or daring one another to steal apples from the Lord's orchard. Old women sit near the door, spinning wool while passing down stories. The young men strut, eager to prove themselves with strong backs and reckless courage. Of course, not all ties are sweet. Quarrels simmer beneath the surface, and suspicion flares easily. Did someone's cow fall ill because of poor fodder, or because a jealous neighbor muttered a curse? Was that quarrel at the bake oven about bread, or about grudges reaching back years? Historians still argue whether medieval villages were models of cooperation or hotbeds of petty conflict, barely held together by necessity. The truth, as you feel it, is both. Community keeps you alive, and community keeps you on edge. Quirky customs shape social life too. You might find yourself drawn into a beating the bounds ritual, where villagers walk the edges of parish land, sometimes literally whipping boys with branches so they remember the boundaries for life. Or you may join in rough games at festivals wrestling, tug of war, or mob football, which looks less like sport and more like organized chaos. Such events bind you together with bruises and laughter alike. At night, the alehouse becomes the village's informal parliament. It's where news is traded, where jokes flow faster than the drink, where grudges are aired in loud voices before they mellow again. You don't to drink much ale costs coin and labor, but even a single mug helps soften the edges of exhaustion. The alehouse is your reminder that though life is harsh, laughter still bubbles up when men and women crowd, close around a fire with a song or a story. In the end, Your neighbors are not just people who live near you. They are the web in which you are caught, for better or worse. They see your failures, they help you rise, they celebrate your joys, and they sharpen your resentments. And you, in turn, do the same for them. In a world with no escape and no privacy, the village itself becomes your family, a loud, meddling, indispensable family that you cannot imagine living without. As the seasons turn, you find yourself taking part in rituals and festivals that stitch time together more firmly than any clock could. The village calendar is not ruled by numbers on parchment, but by feast days, saints' days, planting days, and harvest celebrations. These events give your life rhythm, carving joy and relief into the monotony of toil. The year begins with winter still clinging stubbornly. Candlemas flickers with hope, blessing candles that are thought to chase away darkness and illness. By spring, Easter arrives, bursting with both spiritual weight and practical relief. Fasting ends, eggs reappear on the table, and fields stir back to life. Bells ring, villagers dress in what passes for their best, and the priest's voice carries promises of resurrection. Though for you, the more immediate miracle is the return of warmer days. May brings its own mischief. Children weave garlands of flowers, and the village raises a maypole, bright ribbons fluttering as you circle in laughter. For a moment, class divisions blur lord and serf alike may dance, though not shoulder to shoulder. Some see it as harmless joy, others as faintly scandalous, a lingering echo of older, perhaps pagan customs. Historians still argue whether May Day was truly about fertility rites, or simply an excuse for a party, but you know only that it is one of the rare days you can laugh without guilt. Summer carries its own festivals, many tied to saints who supposedly protect crops, cattle, or health. You march in processions, carrying banners, sprinkling holy water on fields, begging heaven for good weather. A bad harvest means hunger, so you kneel, sing, and hope, even if half the rituals feel more like superstition than scripture. Charms are tucked into pockets, prayers mumbled over seed sacks, relics carried from church to field. Quirky? Perhaps, but when survival hangs on the whim of weather, you cling to every straw. Harvest time is both brutal and exhilarating. Fields must be cleared, grain stored, and debts tallied. When it is finally done, the village celebrates with ale, roasted meats, and laughter that spills into the night. Bonfires blaze, music rings out, and you remember what it feels like to have a full belly and a light heart. For once, the year's anxiety loosens its grip. The Lord may claim the lion's share of grain, but for a few days, you taste triumph. Winter festivals bring the cycle full circle. Christmas, the 12 days, Epiphany, all blur together with candlelight, carols, and feasting when possible. Families gather by smoky hearths. Children marvel at small treats, and neighbors share what little they can spare. Beneath the cheer lies dread, for the long hungry months loom, but you take what comfort you can in the glow of fire and ritual. Through all these moments, you notice something. Festivals do more than feed the spirit. They reinforce bonds, settle quarrels, and remind everyone of their place in the web of village life. You may never travel far, but these communal bursts of music, food, and prayer let you glimpse a world beyond mere survival. And so, each year feels less like a straight line and more like a wheel, turning again and again, carrying you from hunger to feast, from work to song, from despair to hope. The wheel spins endlessly, and you spin with it, finding meaning not in progress, but in return. When illness creeps into your cottage, you feel its shadow heavier than any lord's tax. Sickness is part of life, unavoidable, relentless. A cough can become a death rattle. A scratch can fester into something monstrous. A fever can carry away a child before dawn. You live close to animals, close to dirt, close to one another, perfect conditions for disease to dance through the village. What do you do when it strikes? First, you turn to what you know. Herbs gathered from hedgerows and gardens, yarrow for wounds, nettle for strength, garlic for nearly everything. Women, especially older ones, are the healers of the village. Their knowledge carried not in books, but in memory and practice. They know which teas soothe, which poultices draw out infection, which charms ease the mind, even if they cannot cure the body. Their remedies are half medicine, half magic. But when your child burns with fever, you do not argue. You cling to hope, however it is offered. Sometimes you summon the barber surgeon, if you can scrape together enough coin. He is equal parts healer and hazard, armed with razors, leeches, and a confidence that may or may not match his skill. He will set broken bones, lance abscesses, or bleed you to balance your humors. Whether you recover or decline after his visit is a gamble, one you make because doing nothing feels worse. The church also plays its role. Priests bless the sick, offer relics to kiss, or prescribe prayers alongside penance. Some illnesses are seen as punishment for sin, others as trials sent by God. Pilgrimage is recommended if the sick can still walk or carried, if family is desperate enough. Relics, holy wells, saints' shrines all promise healing, though whether they deliver is another matter. Historians still argue whether these acts offered real physical benefit or simply eased minds enough for the body to rally. Quirks of medieval medicine can sound strange to modern ears. Some villagers believe powdered toad cures fevers, or that wearing a ruby protects against plague. Amulets carved with odd symbols dangle from necks, meant to ward off the unseen. You might laugh, if not for the sobering truth. Sometimes the amulet wearers live, and sometimes the scoffers die. Coincidence or hidden wisdom? You do not question. It is enough to cling to what little control you can muster. Plague years are the worst. Whispers arrive first, of sickness in the next town. Then a cart rolls through, carrying the stench of truth. Entire families vanish within weeks. The village changes in ways you cannot unsee: emptied cottages, fields untended, silence where laughter once rang. You fear the cough in your own throat, the swell of glands, the rash that spreads too fast. No herb, no charm, no priest's blessing feels strong enough when death stalks the very air. And yet, you endure. You learn to accept that health is never guaranteed, that death is a neighbor as constant as any living one. Perhaps that is why joy burns so brightly when it appears, because it must shine against the backdrop of so much uncertainty. Each day of health feels like a small miracle, though you would never use such lofty words. Instead, you simply rise, stretch your aching body, and give thanks that, at least for today, you can still work, still eat, still laugh. Step beyond your smoky cottage, and the fields stretch outward like a second home, except here, your labor is heavier, your body bent beneath the sun. The land is not yours, yet it shapes you more than walls ever could. Strips of soil, narrow and uneven, mark your portion in the open field system. They lie scattered, not clustered, so you trudge back and forth across the patchwork, always aware that your fate is stitched to your neighbor's. In spring, you sow barley, oats, peas seeds dropped carefully into furrows, each one a gamble against weather and pest. You guide the plow, the oxen straining, mud sucking at your boots. The smell of earth clings to your hands, and the wind carries both hope and dread. A good harvest means survival. A poor one means hunger, perhaps even death. Every seed feels like both promise and plea. Summer weeds sprout as fast as crops. You hack them down, sweat dripping, back aching. The sun burns, but you push on, because if you rest too long, weeds steal what little you have planted. Children help, their small fingers pulling what yours cannot, their laughter blending with groans of work. Sometimes the Lord's steward rides past, checking whether you've tended the strips properly. His gaze makes you straighten your back and pretend not to limp, even when pain coils through your spine. Autumn is both triumph and torment. Sickles swing, cutting grain stalks that rustle like brittle parchment. Whole families labor from dawn to dusk, racing storms and fading daylight. The Lord takes his share first, a fact as inevitable as gravity. What remains must feed you until the next harvest. You store it carefully, guarding against damp, rot, and rodents that chew through your winter hope. Quirks of field life stand out. To fertilize the land, you scatter manure, sometimes human waste mixed with straw, the stench unbearable yet vital. Children chase birds away with rattles, while old men mutter weather lore predicting rain by the color of the sky or the behavior of animals. Historians still argue whether such signs held any real truth or were simply comforting rituals passed down through centuries. Winter brings no relief, only different toil. You repair tools, mend fences, cart wood, and tend animals in byres that reek of dung and hay. The ground may be frozen, but your obligations are not. Hunger gnaws as stores dwindle, and you stretch thin porridge further each week, praying for spring's return. Through all this, you understand the truth. You do not work the land. The land works you. It shapes your hands into claws, your back into a bow, your skin into leather. You are tethered to it, body and soul, and though it is harsh, it is also constant. Every furrow you plow, every stalk you reap, ties you closer to the soil that both sustains and enslaves you. And so, as you let the story of Hera and Hercules settle in your mind, you realize that history and myth are never truly simple. They twist and turn like the constellations above us, where the lion of Nemea and the eagle of Zeus still shine in the night sky, glowing reminders of stories told for thousands of years. You see, Hera's relationship with Hercules was not only about anger or punishment, nor was it entirely about hidden affection. It was something in between, an eternal dance of opposition and recognition, a struggle that shaped the life of one hero and the legacy of one goddess. As you close your eyes, picture the quiet night of ancient Greece, when shepherds told these myths under the stars, when poets recited them in echoing halls, and when children fell asleep listening to tales of gods and heroes. The stories may have been filled with conflict, but in the end, they carried the same message, that life is complex, relationships are layered, and even the gods themselves were not free from contradiction. And so you drift now, slowly, gently, into the same kind of dream where Hercules walks among us, carrying his labors, while Hera watches from above stern, judging, but never forgetting the strange bond that tied them together. Sleep well, knowing that even in myth, every rivalry hides a truth, and every punishment carries a shadow of care.